So XDefiant has been out for a little while now, and Season 1 is fully underway. I wanted to do a full in-depth review of the game, but I don't just want to talk about a few bugs or that the gunplay feels nice. I wanted to review everything. Give you the meta guns, including a loadout for every single gun in the game. A faction tier list with a guide on how to use all the factions, as well as discussing what is good and what needs to be improved in the game. I've played since the closed early access betas, and have played as much as I can since the game is fully released. Really quickly guys, before the video begins, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all of that good shit. It really does help the channel grow a ton. Be sure to check out my locals as well if you do want to support my work further in the future. But let's go ahead and just jump right into the video. Right off the bat, I wanted to give you guys the best settings for the game. I'm gonna just let them play behind me. You can go ahead and pause to see what you need. Keep in mind I am a controller player and I play on an Xbox Elite controller, so there won't be any mouse and key settings. And if you do run a controller without paddles, you will have to, of course, adjust for that. These settings should help with your frame rate, your movement, your accuracy, and more. Keep in mind that you may want to run a different UI setup than mine. I would always suggest consulting what the pros are doing because after all, they play the game 12 hours a day. Now let's get into some tips and tricks to improve your gameplay. I consistently drop 70+ kill games, and much of my gameplay I'm actually not even using game sound because I'm also watching YouTube or listening to music. I'm an iPad kid, so most of my in-game reactions are actually just based on what I see in the game. The first trick I have is to bunny hop. Make sure you're bunny hopping a lot. Now, don't just spam it for no reason. They've actually added an update that after your third bunny hop, like your fourth bunny hop, you will get some ridiculous weapon sway, so don't spam it for no reason. Just use it to help you win a gunfight. Now make sure that you bunny hop, side to side, because just jumping up and down in place doesn't really help you. You can also sprint side to side in this game. Using these two things combined can make you a very difficult target for your opponents to hit. You can jump slide in the game as well. Back in Black Ops 3, there was a mechanic called a G-slide, and this reminds me a lot of that because while not as effective, it's the same functionally. This is a great trick to just move around the map quicker. Run with your pistol out. If you haven't figured it out by now, you move much faster with your pistol out. Again, this helps you just get back into the fight quickly. You can actually avoid flashbangs by turning away from them. Now, normally they smack me straight in the forehead, so it doesn't matter, but it's nice to have the option to not be blinded for 30 seconds. Seriously, the flashbangs are super strong, so being able to avoid them is pretty clutch. Shoot the spider bots. If you don't kill it before it hugs your face, just look down and hip fire and you can kill it then. You can actually crouch to avoid mines in the game. I hate mines and still die to them all the time, but being able to not die to them or have the possibility to not die to them is huge. Now I don't know if this next thing is a glitch, but the Phantom bubble, the Aegis bubble, actually has a range where you can kill people a couple feet outside of it. So keep that in mind, both if you're attacking the Aegis and if you are playing as the Aegis. They don't necessarily have to be inside the bubble for the shotgun to kill them. The Echelon ghillie suit camo. Basically, as long as you don't shoot your gun, you stay camoed. Even doing things like throwing your tacticals, you will stay camoed. Reloading, you will stay camoed. Shooting your gun is actually the only thing that breaks your camo. You can actually counter DeadSec's ult. So normally the ult cancels all of your abilities. However, if you die, the effect doesn't linger. If you know that you're in a situation where you need to pop your ult soon, but DeadSec ults first, sometimes dying intentionally can be a good counter to that. You can actually wallbang things in the game too. Most things in the game that look like they're made of metal, you can't wallbang. However, there are things that are made of wood or that have tarps covering them, and those are typically things that you can in fact wallbang. Use your minimap. It's essentially a classic Call of Duty minimap with red dots that ping when the enemies shoot. This is perfect for a veteran of the Boomer Infantry Division like myself. I grew up on the classic Call of Duties, and whoever decided to mess with the minimap in some of the Call of Duties, I would personally like to slap that person. Hell, given the state of the last several Call of Duties, maybe there's several slaps that need to go around. Now, before we get into the guns and the loadouts, I do want to say a couple of things. The gunplay in the game is super crispy and genuinely feels great. Every single gun in the game has its use. Even the guns that I don't necessarily like as much and list lower on the tiers can be used, and you can even do very well with them, as long as you play smart and put yourself in advantageous situations. The time to kill is also right in the sweet spot. It's fast, but it doesn't just feel like you're getting deleted off the map. At launch and during the betas, the hit registration was still spotty, and don't get me wrong, it still is, but it does improve with every update. Now again, the game is still heavily dependent on ping. The best ping I get is typically around 60 to 70 milliseconds, just because of where I live. If I have that, I feel like I'm unkillable in a juggernaut on the map. Anything over that though, once I start breaking into like the 80 millisecond range, my bullets genuinely feel much weaker. Keep in mind, the meta loadouts will probably change in the future as well, just due to any future gun balancing updates. Now, the individual loadouts themselves will probably be fine, but it's more about how good the guns are and where they rank on the tiers list. Probably right after I record and upload this video, due to my luck. Again, check with the pros if you want to know what to use. Let's start by talking about the assault rifles. The first gun that we're going to discuss is the MDR. Now, the MDR is probably the closest to an AR sub hybrid. It feels faster than most of the ARs, but it feels heavier than most of the submachine guns. It's really kind of a tweener sort of gun. Now, this gun has improved with updates over time, and it's one of the best guns in the game currently. The next gun we have is the AK-47, a classic for, all shooters. The AK-47 again is another great gun. It just feels like it hits hard overall and can be built out to be an extremely dominant gun in the game. It is also up there in terms of one of the better guns in the game overall. The next gun we're going to talk about is the ACR. Now, early on in this game's life cycle, the ACR was clearly the best out of the assault rifles. Now, it has gone down a notch due to some of the balancing updates that have come to the game. It's still overall a very good assault rifle. It hits hard, it feels good, it shoots good, but it has been knocked down to sort of the next tier. The next gun we have is the M4A1. The M4 is kind of underwhelming as an assault rifle. It's definitely on the kind of weaker end of these assault rifles. It doesn't feel bad to use, it shoots fine, it just feels weak in comparison to those other guns, but it is still overall a gun that can be very viable. It's just there's no reason to choose it over the MDR, the AK, the ACR. Those guns are clearly better, but the M4, it's still perfectly usable. Next, we have the newest assault rifle in the game, the LVOAC. That's a hard name to say. This gun, it's similar to the ACR, where it's a very solid overall gun to use. It's not as good as the M16 or the AK or the MDR, but it is definitely a kind of clear step over the M4. It's much closer to where the ACR lies. And it's overall just a very solid assault rifle. The last assault rifle that we have to discuss overall is the M16. Now, the M16 is a burst assault rifle, which is what makes it different, of course, and it is an absolute monster if you build it outright, and probably is the best assault rifle in the game currently. This M16 kind of reminds me of like the COD 4 or Modern Warfare Remastered M16, where you use it and go, whoa, this gun might be a little too good. Like, it is that good. It is such a good gun that it kind of makes you go, whoa, when you go to use it. Again, it is a burst, and if you don't like burst weapons, you're probably still not gonna like this gun, but it is that freaking good. Next, we'll talk about the submachine guns in the game, and the first one we're going to start out with is the submachine gun that's been dominant since launch, the MP7. Now, they just recently nerfed the MP7, and it is still probably the best sub in the game. It's fast, you move quick with it, you feel, I mean, it shoots amazing, it feels great when you use it, it has good damage, good fire rate, everything it does so well. You can laser people at range. I mean, this gun plagued lobbies. I mean, for the first couple months this game was out, you'd run into 6 stacks using the MP7 because it was, for a while, the clear best gun in the game. Now, with the recent nerfs, it's probably not the best gun in the game anymore, but to me, it is still the best submachine gun in the game. And it's crazy that even after a strong nerf, it still is that good. That tells you how dominant it was before, and at least now we should see a little bit more variety with the submachine gun play in the game. The next submachine gun that we're going to discuss is the P90, and the P90 has just kind of since the game's been out been a very solid submachine gun. It feels great, and like a lot of P90s, it has a lot of ammo just starting out, and the iron sights I actually do like a lot on the P90. Again, this is a gun that's not dominant. It's not in the top tier, but it's sort of in the next tier down, where it's just overall a very solid weapon that does a lot of things well. It's just not what you would call a dominant gun. It is a lot of fun to use though, so I definitely would recommend that you if you haven't, give it a try, but just note there are guns that you would consider better than the P90 overall, but still it's a darn good gun and feels great to use. The next submachine gun that we're going to talk about is the MP5, which again is a classic gun in shooters, and it is clearly the worst submachine gun in the game. It's no doubt clearly the worst sub in the game. Now, it's still usable. It's definitely in a tier below the P90. Again, the MP5, easily the worst submachine gun in the game, but it's usable. It just definitely feels weaker than the other subs. And the last submachine gun that we are going to talk about in the game is the Vector. And the Vector is actually really interesting. It's probably the second best submachine gun in the game after the MP7, but the Vector, it's the most affected by attachments probably out of all of the subs in the game. And what do I mean by the most affected by attachments? Well, when you first start using it and you don't have any attachments unlocked, you'll probably be like, this gun sucks. It just doesn't feel good to use. It is harder to control the accuracy, doesn't have a lot of ammo, so it just feels really inconsistent. But once you build this gun out properly, all of a sudden, it goes from being super, super underwhelming to like, whoa, this gun is really good. It's very interesting just how affected by attachments this gun is. So if you didn't give the Vector a chance, maybe because it didn't feel great, unlock some attachments with it, and then it should feel great after you do that. It's a drastic difference. So the next category of weapons we'll discuss is the LMGs. Now, I'm not really a fan of LMGs personally, it's just they don't suit my playstyle, but I still played with these a ton just to try to get familiar and build out the best loadouts with them. Now the first LMG we have to discuss is the M249. The M249 overall is actually really solid. It's kind of in that same categories like the P90 or the ACR. It's actually just a very good LMG all the way around. Again, they're not my preferred playstyle or anything like that, but if you are an LMG player, it is a very good place to start. We also have the M60, and the M60 is actually probably even a little better than the M249. They're very, very similar. They do a lot of the same things well. The M60, I would probably have to give the edge to over the M249. It's just, to me, it's just a little bit better, but again, I'm not a huge LMG guy, but when I was playing with them, I definitely preferred the M60 over the M249. The last LMG we have is probably clearly the worst one. It's the RPK. I actually put up some good gameplays with the RPK. It's definitely what I would consider a bottom tier gun overall. Again, every gun in this game does have its uses, but the RPK kind of falls flat in comparison to most of the other guns in the game. Next up, we have everybody's favorite section, the shotguns, and the first shotgun we're going to discuss is the AA-12. Now, at launch, I would probably say the AA-12 was the worst gun in the game. It was fucking horrible. Its range was about 5 inches. I mean, seriously, I could whip out my wiener and probably have more range with that than the AA-12. Who am I kidding? It's not that long. You get what I'm saying. The AA-12 was dreadful, but recently they've updated the shotguns and it went from dreadful to just okay. The AA-12 is best utilized, in close range combat, especially holding the objective. It's actually usable now, whereas before it really wasn't before the updates. But overall, it's still very underwhelming. I'd probably put it in a similar tier to like the MP5. Useful, but just underwhelming. The next shotgun that we have to discuss is the double barrel. Now, after the updates, the double barrel is probably the worst shotgun in the game. Early on in the game's life cycle, it probably would have been the best, and that's simply because it had the most range. But after these updates where it's kind of shaken everything up, the range is really all it has going for it. Because of course with the double barrel, once you shoot, you have to go through a long reload. You only get 2 shells and then a long reload animation. And there's not really anything that you can do to stem off the long reload animation in the game, which is understandable. It's a double barrel shotgun, you're kind of restricted. And overall, right now, out of all of the primaries in the game, the double barrel shotgun's probably the worst primary in the game. The last shotgun that we have to discuss is the M870, and it is just okay. It's just okay. I'd probably say it's a little worse than the AA-12, but it's basically in that sort of same tier. It's a pump action, so it doesn't have the fire rate advantages that the AA-12 has, but it definitely has a little bit more range, and of course, it has a faster fire rate than the double barrel, so it's going to be better than the double barrel. It's just kind of right in between those two for those reasons. Usable, but underwhelming again. So we also have the snipers. Now, the snipers in this game overall are very good, and they're a lot of fun to use. Now, they have been nerfed to where you do have flinch now, which is a great nerf because for a long time, people would just stand there fully ADS with the snipers. It'd be like the biggest bots in the world. And you would just laser them, and they would just kill you through it every single time. It took no skill, because they had fucking 10 seconds to line up their shot. Now, if you have a bot and they're using a sniper, you start shooting them, and they either die or they back off, because they know they can't compete now. Overall, it was a great update to the game. And the first sniper that we're going to discuss is the TAC-50, and for a while, the TAC-50 was clearly the best sniper in the game. It's not the case anymore, but for a while that was definitely true, and it's still a very good sniper overall. It is slower, but hits harder than the M44. Now, going to the M44, like I said, it has the exact opposite problems that the TAC-50 has. It's faster, but it's weaker. So it's funny that you have to kind of build them out in opposite ways. In the M44, it's basically in this same category as the TAC-50, where I wouldn't put either of them in the top tier, but they're sort of both in that next tier below, and they're both very good snipers to use. Now, the newest sniper, the L115, is clearly the best sniper in the game. It's not close. It is very clearly a top tier gun, and is very clearly the best sniper in the game. Much like the TAC-50, it's slower and hits harder, and you need to build it out for speed. And once you do that, it's just a monster on the map. It is dominant right now in terms of a sniper. Again, clearly the best sniper in the game. All 3 of them are actually very good and very fun to use. And if you enjoy sniping, well, this should be a great game for you because all of them are good. And if you enjoy sniping, then clearly you should love this game because all of them are very good. And myself, someone who doesn't really care that much about sniping, even I have had a lot of fun just running around with the snipers in this game because they're that good, they're that fun to use. So the last category of primary weapons that we're going to discuss are the marksman rifles. Now, there's only 2 in the game, and one of them, the first one that we're going to discuss, is the MK20 SSR. Now, the MK20 SSR is clearly the better of the marksman rifles. It's really not close particularly. It's actually, I wouldn't quite put it as a top tier gun, but it's probably about 1 step down in that same sort of category that the ACR and the Vector is in. Now, when you combine this gun with the Cleaners class, it's a match made in heaven. High damage plus tick rate, you can 2-tap a lot of people with this gun. Now, of course, because it's a marksman rifle, it's very slow and sluggish, but combining it with the Cleaners and it turns into a fucking great gun. And the other marksman rifle is the SVD. Now, the SVD is really underwhelming. Again, like every other gun in this game, I keep saying it, but it's useful, but it's in that extremely sort of underwhelming tier that like the MP5 or the M4 is in. It's just kind of okay. Again, a lot of tactical rifles, they're not really my sort of things. I'm not a huge marksman rifle type of guy. I typically prefer a much faster pace of play myself, but the SVD, it does have its uses, especially if you lock people down and you have like a good head glitch. And again, it does get better when you combine it with the Cleaners, but again, overall, it's just underwhelming. So with these secondaries, I'm not really going to discuss them and rank them like I did the primaries in the game, but I do still want to give a brief overview of them. So the worst one in the game is probably the M9. It's just kind of your basic pistol. It's fine, but it's really nothing special overall. The next best one's probably the M1911. Again, it's fine, but probably not the best overall. Then you have the Deagle or the D50, and it's a harder hitting gun, but it's very slow. It's more inaccurate. It's a clear upgrade over the other two, but it's again just nothing special. You also have the Magnum, which is basically in the exact same boat as the Deagle. It's harder, but it's slower. It's more inaccurate. Again, it's fine, but it's nothing special. The newest secondary in the game, the sawed-off shotgun, same boat as the other two. Hits hard, poor range on this one though. That's kind of the biggest difference. It's much more of an up close and personal gun, but it's nothing special. The clear number one overall secondary in the game is the 93R. It's really not close. Again, the secondaries are just that. They are secondaries. You shouldn't be running them as primary guns, but the 93R is kind of the most versatile. It does everything well. It's a burst weapon. It has, good fire rate, hits hard, good range, it's easy to control. It's just got that clear versatility advantage that the other guns don't have, and it should be really the only secondary that you ever need to run, at least for now, unless there's some big balancing changes in terms of secondaries. And that's one thing I do really like about this game, is that they treat the secondaries as secondaries. They're not dominant, and they shouldn't be. They should be treated as secondaries, and that's one thing that this game has done extremely well. As I said with the guns, every faction has its use. There's nothing that's so bad that you can't use it. Sure, some things are clearly better than others, but everything is useful. I would love to see an esport team where everyone has to pick a different faction on the team. I'm sure the uses would get pretty creative. Now, I don't play ranked, but apparently they're just now adding a faction restriction to ranked, which to me would be like a day one thing to have in ranked, but I guess they're just adding it now, which is just like, what are you doing? The first faction that we'll discuss is the Libertad faction. Libertad is one of the best factions in the game. Being able to heal yourself is obviously huge. The passive ability is healing, which obviously is always a good thing to have. You have the boost ability and the canister. The canister is good to throw on an objective that's being pushed, and the boost is best to help win a couple gunfights. Both abilities are very good depending on the map or the game mode. The ult is also extremely good. You feel invincible for a moment. You're not, but you're damn close. Don't just stand still and let people shoot you, because you are still killable, but you do feel like you can't be killed while you're in it. Phantoms are very good as well. Probably the best for taking and holding objectives out of all the factions in the game. By definition, the Phantoms is one of the best factions in the game, just due to the fact that their passive is starting with more health. They have 120 HP. The mag barrier is great and can be used when holding off an enemy push or to help you get some breathing room. It's really great for the escort game mode, and this is by far the best ability for the Phantoms. The Blitz Shield, or aka the Riot Shield, kinda sucks, but it does have its uses. It can be good to help your team get off spawn or make an initial objective push. It's just a clunky riot shield, but again, it does have its uses. The Aegis ult bubble is absolutely unfair. especially if you don't have any way to cancel it as an opponent. The Aegis ult bubble is basically a free objective capture or objective hold. It's that good. Echelon, since the betas, has been one of the best factions in the game. The ult is actually ridiculous, and you'll often see just crazy clips hit with it. The passive of never showing on the minimap is great too. You don't need to run silences ever with Echelon. Both abilities are also amazing. You can be invisible or have a ton of intel where people are. The intel suit gives you all the information on where enemies are. It's basically wall hacks. It used to give that ability to your teammates too, but they did nerf that portion. The enemies will still show on your teammates' minimaps even after the nerf. The digital ghillie suit makes you practically invisible. If you're running, there's still a glimmer that can be seen, but I've seen people, sit in corners and they're, legitimately invisible with the digital ghillie suit. There is no weakness with this faction. This faction's abilities have been nerfed several times, and it is still a top tier faction in my book. That should tell you just how strong it is. Now, the cleaners are interesting. The incendiary rounds as the passive are so good. They make a lot of guns kill in one less bullet. The marksman rifles, like we said, can go from either 3-shot to a 2-shot or even a 1-shot kill in the head. This is obviously a huge deal. The Libertad's heal is kind of a counter to this though. The firebomb is great. You can quickly take an objective or bail yourself out of a losing situation. You can jump into a hill and kill everyone in it. Sure, they'll probably kill you too, but that's worth the trade. The drone is okay. It can be good to help close off angles, but if you don't hit someone with it right away, they'll just wait a second until the fire's gone. It's a little more timing dependent. The ult can be great at times. It's an insta-kill purifier similar to like Black Ops 3's purifier. The range on it's okay. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's definitely fine. And basically it's an insta-kill when it touches someone. It's best used for holding down an area or try to quickly retake an area. DeadSec's passive is actually an ability that allows you to reprint more tacticals. As long as you stay alive, you'll be able to keep reprinting grenades and you'll keep having more nades unlike any other faction. The spider bot ability is the most annoying ability in the game. It's a free stun and basically a free kill as long as you're close enough to see the enemy it hugs. It auto targets them too, so it's not like you even have to control the thing. The other ability is hijack, which, as the name implies, hijacks your opponent's util. Really, it's best to use against the Phantom Shield to make it your own. The ult ability Lockout cancels all of your opponent's abilities, which is obviously extremely useful. If your opponent is using their bubble shield on the last hill, well, this ability cancels it, and it can completely change the outcome of a game. The newest faction in the game is the GSK faction. The GSK has the passive ability of reducing the received headshot damage, which is huge, especially in this game because headshots are super important in this game. The Shockwire ability slows down enemies and makes it hard for them to move. They take damage, they can't ADS during it. It's great for blocking off choke points. The other ability is the ADS or Active Defense System. It's basically just like a trophy system from previous Call of Duties, which was a great addition to the game because the nade spam was a little ridiculous for a while. Again, if you have control of an objective, now you can't be naded off of it. The ult is their flash shield, and it's not bad, but it's kind of underwhelming. It's a riot shield that flashes people. You can also shoot from behind it. It's useful for pushing an objective. Again, it's extremely underwhelming, but it does have a very specific use case. Now, one thing that XDefiant has done extremely well is their maps in this game are very good. As we know, in games like Call of Duty, the maps can be extremely important, and they can make or break the quality of the game. The best Call of Duties all had great maps. The worst Call of Duties all had the worst maps. It's a very important factor, and that's something that this game does extremely well, is the maps in the game are very good. So the first map that we'll discuss in the game is Arena. Now, for me, I like a little bit more control in the game, and this map, because it's so small and so fast, you don't quite get as much control, and depending on the game modes like Occupy, the spawns can get a little out of whack at times. Now, because it is the smallest map in the game, it is the fastest paced map in the game, which is good and can be useful for doing things like leveling up your guns. But for me, I like a little bit more control to the chaos than this map provides. And so for that, it's just not my personal favorite. I know a lot of people, this is their favorite map in the game, but for me, it's just kind of a pretty good map, but not great. The next map we'll talk about is Attica Heights, and Attica Heights it's kind of just the definition of mid. There's nothing really that's wrong with it, but there's nothing that really makes it stand out or feels special. It's just kind of an okay map with 2 different levels, and everything plays fine on it. It's just not a map that I really feel like I have to play if it comes up in a rotation, but it's a map that overall it's fine. In a similar tier, I'd probably put the new map Clubhouse, and it's just okay. It's a newer map, and maybe just me not having played it as much is part of the reason why I don't have any, particular affinity for it. But overall, nothing super wrong with it, but it's just a map that I feel like it's just okay. If it comes up in the rotation, I don't have any problems with it, but it doesn't do anything special. It's not anything that I feel like I necessarily have to play. Next, we have Dumbo, and Dumbo's a map that I actually enjoy more than the previous 2 maps we discussed. It has both open areas and tighter corridors, so it can kind of suit either playstyle. Maybe that's why I like it more, is if you want to snipe, there's a more open area, but if you want a more chaotic experience, there are really, really tight corridors that you can fight in. Overall, it's what I would just call a solid map. I wouldn't necessarily call it like the best map in the game or anything like that, but it is a much more solid map. For some reason, people always vote against it when I play though, so I don't get to play it that much, but I rather do enjoy this map. So the next map that we have is Echelon HQ, and to me, I feel like this is the best map in the game. It is a close quarters combat map, but unlike Arena, it feels like it's a little bit more controlled. Now, the 2 main game modes that I like to play are Dom and Occupy, and I feel like they both play extremely well on this map. The spawns always seem to make sense. You don't seem to die in ways that don't make sense, like someone spawning on top of you. But you do get back into the action very quick on this map, but at the same time, when you spawn up, you feel like you have a chance to breathe. To me, like I said, this is the best map in the game. Next, we have Emporium, and this map, I put it in a similar category to like Dumbo, where it's pretty good overall. Now, this map, I've played quite a bit. For some reason, it's a map that kind of always comes up in the rotation, and every game mode that I play on it, they play very good. It's not a map that I would ever call great. It's not what I would say is the best map in the game, but it's kind of in a tier below that where it feels very good, and I'm happy to play it when it comes up in the rotation. Along that same line, we have Liberty, and Liberty is again just a very solid overall map. It's not my favorite by any stretch, but I really do enjoy this map. Liberty to me is a map again that comes up in the rotation quite a bit, and I'm never disappointed to go ahead and hop on and play it. It is just a very solid map overall. It again kind of has that more open section where you can snipe, but it also has areas where you can engage in close quarters combat, and I like maps that kind of combo those 2 things together. Next, we have Mayday, and Mayday to me is another like really, really good map. I wouldn't probably put it in the top tier, but it's darn close. It seems to play so well. It has a very good flow. The combat that takes place in the center on the airplane, because that's always where a hill is, can be chaotic, but it has really open lanes. You can snipe people across. It to me just has a lot of flow to it no matter the game mode, and that's why I just really enjoy this map. Again, a map that comes up in my rotation quite a bit. Next, we have Noodleplex, and Noodleplex is also a just banger of a map. Noodleplex comes up in my rotation quite a bit, and I would probably say it's the 2nd best map in the game. It just has a ton of flow. It has these outdoor areas that are very open, but again, more confined spaces. I know that's a theme in maps that I like. Everything just makes sense with the map. It has lanes that make sense. The spawns always make sense, and it just overall flows exactly how a good map should. This is kind of textbook, does everything right for a good map. Now, I know I put Echelon HQ higher than this map in my rankings, but this map is kind of textbook how a map should be. It does everything extremely, extremely well with that sort of classic 3-lane design. Next, we have Pueblito, and this map is also just tremendous, and it's probably what I would say is the 3rd best map in the game. Most of the battles though in the game, and I think this is why I enjoy it so much, is most of the battles are more mid-range or short range, even though the map itself is pretty large. And generally, you want that sort of short to mid-range combat feel. The map itself can be large, but if people are getting in engagements in short to mid-range, then typically the maps play pretty well. And this map is kind of a textbook example of a larger map that doesn't necessarily play like a large map. It is a very good map overall, and all the game modes seem to play on it very well. So next we have Showtime, and Showtime it's a very good map. I would put it in kind of the next tier down overall, but it is a very good map that tends to play very well. Again, it's more of a classic, somewhat symmetrical 3-lane design. It's got the catwalk up top, which is a very dominant position, and it is a good place to try to control the pace of play. Again, while I wouldn't call this a top tier map, it is kind of in that next tier below where it's still very, very good. And it comes up in my rotation quite a bit. Again, people seem to enjoy it because they vote for it all the time. Now, there are some linear maps that are only used for certain game modes like Escort or like Zone Control. And those maps, again, they only have those specific uses, but those are also very good maps in the game as well. The first one we'll talk about is the newest map, Daytona, and overall, it's a solid map. It's not really anything that I would call special, but I do like that it's bright, it's vibrant, it's a good environment visually. I don't like maps that don't have a lot of color typically, because to me it makes people stand out more if there's a lot of colors on the map, because a lot of the characters, they just stand out a little more. And that's one thing that this map does extremely well, is it's bright and it's vibrant. But the layout, it's just okay. It's nothing that I would call special again, and it's kind of in a more mid-tier map to me, but it plays fine. The next linear map that we have is Meltdown, and to me it's by far the worst map. Probably in the entire game, it's probably the worst map. And that shows you how good the maps in this game actually are, because I don't back out of a game if I see that we are on Meltdown. And unlike some other Call of Duty games, there are maps where you do just leave the game if you see that you're on it. And this map, despite being the worst map in the game, I don't necessarily feel the need to abandon the match. It's very mediocre as a map. It doesn't really seem to do anything special or have any great flow to it or anything like that. But overall, it's still playable, but I would rather play every other map in the game. The next linear map that we have that we're going to talk about is Midway, and Midway is a perfect name because it is super mid. It's nothing special. It plays fine, but it's not a map that you're gonna really feel the need to have to play if you're playing a game mode like Escort. It just plays fine. It doesn't do anything special. The flow is fine. Again, Midway is a perfect name for it because it is the definition of mid. We also have Times Square, and it's in the same boat as Midway. It's not a great map. It's okay. It at least has some shorter range combat opportunities in some areas, but some areas it has extremely long range combat opportunities, and those long range engagements don't feel great, but the short range ones don't really feel great either. There's something that just doesn't quite flow particularly great about this map, but again, it doesn't play terrible. It's not terrible. It's just not really that good. It's just the definition of mid again. The last of the linear maps is the map called Zoo. Now, Zoo is actually pretty solid in terms of the linear maps. It definitely seems to have a lot more flow to it, and the engagements, a lot of them are short to mid range, despite it being a very long range map. And there's not a lot of places where you feel like you get locked in. Some of the other maps, there are those problems, like Times Square. There's a couple spots where you feel like if you don't get past them, you're just stuck there. And Zoo, fortunately, feels like it flows a lot better. And to me, it just seems like it's a much better map than some of the other linear maps in the game. Most of the linear maps, they don't really do anything special for me, and that's just kind of how they have to be designed. They have to be designed in a linear way because of the game modes that play on them. But Zoo, to me, definitely seems like it has quite a bit more flow to it, which is nice. Now that the game has been out for some time, there has been updates outside of balancing. There's been some really good changes. The matchmaking is much faster than it once was, like much faster. The bug where your utils wouldn't pop has been patched. The XP boosters now only count down while you're actively in a match. These are huge and positive changes. But there's also still core issues with the game that continue to be nagging issues. The characters are hideously ugly, likely to appease the Alphabet Mafia since there's no campaign. I mean, the women look more masculine than the men. Cheaters are still an issue, not an overwhelming one, but they do exist and you will run into them. I've seen quite a few clips of blatant cheating posted online.
Like, this guy's actually getting boosted and he thinks he's good. Fucking Savini, bro.
Geh doch einfach raus aus der Runde, Digga. Ich spiel nie wieder mit dir.
Oh my god, bro. Look at them. 2 cheaters in one lobby, bro.
Ubisoft has never been known for having good anti-cheat, so this problem is more than a little concerning. There are bugs that have been in the game since launch that haven't been patched. Don't get me wrong, there's many that have been, but there's several that have not. My stats are still bugged, have been since launch. The KDs were supposed to get fixed, but nope, mine's still broken, along with the rest of my stats. Sometimes your entire screen is filled with fog. Spider bots will tilt your camera and make it crooked. The sawed-off shotgun didn't unlock for me when I completed the levels in the battle pass and took a full day of me not playing the game to actually unlock. And dear God, I am tired of dying around corners. The biggest issues with the game are the netcode and the lack of new content. Everything else can be fixed and has been getting fixed over time. Sure, the netcode has gotten marginally better, but it's still not great. This is a common complaint amongst players on all platforms. When people shoot, they want their bullets to hit what they're aiming at. Now, I can't imagine how difficult of a problem this is to solve, but it should hopefully be a top priority for the developers. Many people ask if XDefiant will be the next Call of Duty killer. I'm sure some people ask ironically because the answer is clearly no. The number of players is steadily declining, and I'm sure after Black Ops 6 comes out, it will continue to decline even further. The game will die before long at the rate new content is being released, and it's truly a shame because the game is genuinely one of the better shooters out right now and has the potential of greatness. Call of Duty gets a pass when they release minimal or subpar content due to how much weight they have to swing around. Fair or unfair, a new IP does not get that same level of grace. Fortunately, there is a roadmap of more content, so hopefully that keeps the player base pleased, but time is the game's greatest enemy for now. The last problem I will discuss is the community itself. Some of the community members of this game are a problem. There are many COD refugees who refuse to believe that there are issues with the game. Any criticism of the game just isn't real, and they're trying to gas you to believe that the problems that you notice aren't real. Objective criticism does not mean that you want the game to fail. In fact, it means the fucking opposite. It means you want the game to be as good as it can be. Lying about the quality of the game doesn't do anybody any favors and only does a disservice to the remainder of the player base. Now, hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. It took a while to put together because I really wanted to kind of experience everything that there is to experience in the game, use all the guns, play all the maps, play all the modes. Now, if you guys did enjoy the video, again, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that good shit. But as always, guys, this has been your boy Drinker, and I am out of here. Peace.